We have to start with our Gaudamus.
Gaudamus igitur juvenes cum sumus. Gaudamus igitur juvenes cum sumus. Postjucundam juventutem, post molestam selectutem, nos habebitumus, nos habebitumus. Vita nostra brevis est, brevi finiretur. Vita nostra brevis est, brevi finiretur. Venit mors velacite, rapit nos atracite, lemini parcetur, lemini parcetur. Vivat Academia, vivant professores, vivat Academia, vivant professores, vivant membrum quodlibet, vivant membrum quodlibet, semper sic in flore, semper sic in flore.
Thank you very much to join us here at this event. But I propose to you that due to the tragic events that happens in the Spain these days, to propose you to have a moment of recollection. Thank you. According to the decision of our Senate, a commission composed by Professor Radu Văcăreanu, Rector of the Technical University of Civil Constructions, Professor Horia Iovu, our Director of the Doctoral School, Professor Ciprian Dobre, our Vice Rector, and Professor Lăcrămioara Diana Robescu, the Dean of the Power System Faculty, and myself, we have elaborated a laudatio in order to award to Professor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez the title of the Doctor Honoris Causa of our university. In this respect, I shall ask Mr. Chancellor to read the laudatio.
Domnule profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez, Domnule președinte al Senatului Academic Tudor Prisecaru, domnule rector Mihnea Costoiu, distinși invitați și membrii ai Senatului Academic. Astăzi avem onoarea de a aduce un omagiu realizărilor domnului profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez, personalitate marcantă a domeniului telecomunicațiilor, al sistemelor multimedia și al educației inginerești, a cărui activitate a influențat în mod semnificativ evoluția acestor domenii și cooperarea academică internațională. Născut în anul 1960 la Madrid, domnul profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez și-a construit cariera pe fundamentul excelenței academice și al pasiunii pentru știință și inovare. A absolvit în anul 1983 programul de masterat în ingineria telecomunicațiilor la Universitatea Politehnica din Madrid, iar în anul 1986 a obținut titlul de doctor în ingineria comunicațiilor cu distincția cum laude. De atunci, întreaga sa activitate profesională s-a desfășurat în cadrul aceleiași instituții, una din cele mai prestigioase universități tehnice din Europa. În perioada studiilor a fost implicat în activitatea didactică și de cercetare, desfășurând activitate ca asistent în laboratorul de fizică și ca cercetător în cadrul departamentului de microunde. Evoluția sa profesională în mediul universitar l-a condus către poziția de profesor universitar titular în cadrul Departamentului de Semnale, Sisteme și Radiocomunicații al Universității Politehnica din Madrid, unde a acumulat decenii de activitate științifică, didactică și managerială. Contribuția științifică este impresionantă. Peste 120 de articole publicate, numeroase capitole în volume de specialitate, lucrări prezentate în conferințe internaționale și o activitate susținută în proiecte ale Comisiei Europene. Domeniile în care a activat, televiziune digitală, sisteme multimedia, interacțiune om-mașină, inteligență ambientală, patrimoniu cultural digital și internetul viitorului, reflectă diversitatea intereselor sale și abilitatea de a anticipa direcțiile emergente ale tehnologiei. A participat la peste 20 de proiecte internaționale și peste 40 de proiecte naționale de cercetare, fiind director sau cercetător principal în consorții europene de referință, precum Remote Access of Museum Archive, Hypermedia Continuous Audiovisual Digital Market in Europe, Next Media, Future Media Internet și multe altele, consolidându-și astfel rolul de lider științific european. Domnul profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez a format generații întregi de ingineri într-o varietate de cursuri, precum rețele, sisteme și servicii multimedia, teledetecție și grafică computerizată, contribuind astfel la dezvoltarea educației inginerești la nivel național și internațional. Începând din anul 2002, ocupă poziția de profesor universitar titular la Universitatea Politehnica din Madrid, unde a activat până în 2013. Această perioadă a fost urmată de o etapă de activitate în cadrul Guvernului Spaniei între anii 2013 și 2014, din 2015 academică și din cadrul Universității din Madrid. Domnul profesor Cisneros Pérez a ocupat funcții importante în cadrul Universității Politehnica din Madrid. A fost membru al Consiliului Școlii între 1996 și 2013, responsabil al programelor doctorale în perioada 2001-2002, membru al Senatului Universitar între 2002 și 2013, respectiv 2015-2025, și prodecan pentru cercetare și doctorat în perioada 2002-2004. Între anii 2004 și 2013, domnul profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez a fost decan al Școlii Tehnice Superioare de Ingineri în Telecomunicații din Madrid, perioadă în care a coordonat implementarea procesului Bologna, modernizarea curiculei, precum și inițierea acordării acreditării internaționale ABET pentru programe de masterat. În aceeași perioadă a condus conferința directorilor de școli de telecomunicații și a reprezentat Agenția Națională pentru Evaluarea Calității și Acreditare, ANECA, din Regatul Spaniei, într-un proiect pilot european dedicat acreditării programelor inginerești. În perioada 2013-2014 a ocupat o poziție de rang înalt în administrația Guvernului Regatului Spaniei, fiind director general al Agenției pentru Promovarea Internațională a Universităților Spaniole, activând în structurile Ministerului Educației și ale Ministerului Afacerilor Externe. O etapă de referință în cariera domnului profesor a fost mandatul de rector al Universității Politehnica din Madrid între anii 2016 și 2025, perioadă în care instituția și-a consolidat vizibilitatea internațională și-a extins parteneriatele strategice și a dezvoltat noi direcții de cercetare, digitalizare și inovare educațională. În semn de recunoaștere a impactului său asupra evoluției universității, i-a fost conferit titlul de Rector Magnificus Emerit. Prestigiul profesional al domnului profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez a fost recunoscut prin numeroase distincții, dintre care menționăm Marea Cruce pentru Merit Aeronautic, acordată de Forțele Aeriene și Spațiale ale Spaniei în anul 2020, Medalia Augustin de Betancourt în anul 2018, titlul de Doctor Honoris Causa al Universității Naționale de Inginerie din Peru în anul 2018 și titlul de profesor onorific al Universității Autonome din Peru 2018. Experiența sa profesională include, de asemenea, activitatea în cadrul Telefonica de Spania, inițial ca membru al grupului de cercetare aplicată între 1985 și 1987, iar ulterior ca expert în servicii mobile între anii 1987 și 1991. În paralel, a cofondat două grupuri academice de referință în Universitatea Politehnică din Madrid, Image Processing Group, între anii 1982 și 2003, și Visual Telecommunication Application Group. Aceste inițiative reflectă contribuția sa esențială la dezvoltarea cercetării aplicate în domeniul telecomunicațiilor și multimedia. Profesorul Guillermo Cisneros Pérez a colaborat în calitate de expert cu Comisia Europeană, cu organisme naționale din Regatul Spaniei și cu platforme tehnologice europene. A fost membru al Comitetului de Conducere al Platformei Tehnologice Europene Networked Electronic Media și vicepreședinte al Platformelor Tehnologice Spaniole pentru Media Electronică și Internetul Viitorului. A fost de asemenea membru în Consiliul Director al Asociației Cezar, Conferința Universităților de Inginerie și Cercetare Avansată din Europa, contribuind la consolidarea rolului universităților tehnice în societatea europeană contemporană. Universitatea Politehnica din Madrid, alături de Universitatea Națională de Știință și Tehnologie Politehnica București, este membră fondatoare a alianței EELISA, European Engineering, Learning, Innovation and Science Alliance. Fondată în anul 2019, EELISA reunește astăzi 10 universități europene și 4 parteneri asociați, constituind un reper al cooperării academice europene în domeniul ingineriei și științei. Odată cu lansarea programului european dedicat Alianței Universităților Europene, Universitatea Politehnica din Madrid și Universitatea Națională de Știință și Tehnologie Politehnica București au inițiat un dialog strategic privind constituirea unei alianțe europene. În acest context, rectorul Guillermo Cisneros Pérez și rectorul Mihnea Costoiu, alături de profesor Victor Gomez Frias și prorector George Darie, au avut un rol esențial în conturarea unui nucleu fondator de cooperare universitară europeană, bazat pe valori comune, excelență academică și deschidere internațională. Ca urmare a acestei inițiative, Alianței i s-a alăturat ulterior universități partenere din cadrul EELISA. Totodată, la propunerea Politehnica București, rectorul Guillermo Cisneros Pérez a acceptat ca alianța să poarte numele EELISA în memoria Elisei Leonidea Zanfirescu, prima femeie inginer din lume, de origine română, un simbol al excelenței, curajului și inovației în inginerie, valori care definesc pe deplin spiritul acestei alianțe europene. Prin implicarea sa constantă, domnul profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez a sprijinit consolidarea parteneriatului între Universitatea Politehnica din Madrid și Politehnica București prin proiecte comune, mobilități academice și inițiative inovatoare în domeniul educației inginerești. Pentru contribuțiile sale remarcabile la dezvoltarea telecomunicațiilor, la inovarea tehnologiilor multimedia, la evoluția educației inginerești europene și la promovarea colaborării universitare internaționale, Senatul Universității Naționale de Știință și Tehnologie Politehnica București îi conferă domnului profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez titlul de doctor honoris causa. Felicitări, domnule profesor, vă dorim succes în proiectele viitoare și vă mulțumim pentru exemplul de profesionalism, echilibru și dedicare pe care îl oferiți comunității academice internaționale.
Vom proceda acum la înmânarea titlului. În continuare, rugăm pe domnul rector Mihnea Costoiu să ne spună câteva cuvinte.
Distinguished Professor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez, dear friend. Distinguished Rector Oscar Garcia Suarez, dear friend. Distinguished guests from UPM, welcome. Mr. President of the Academic Senate, Mr. Vice President and Chancellor, dear colleague Vice Rectors, Deans, distinguished member of the Academic Senate, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. It's a great honor, a sense of pleasure for me to address you today on the occasion of awarding the title of Doctor Honoris Causa for Professor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez, an outstanding academic leaders and valued partners and a true friend for our university. Professor Cisneros Pérez, allow me to warmly congratulate you on behalf of the entire academic community of the National University of Science and Technology, Politehnica Bucharest, for this well-deserved distinction. Today's recognition reflects not only your remarkable academic and institutional achievement, but also the respect and appreciation you have for the visionary leader and a very strong advocate at European University cooperation. Professor Petrescu mentioned, together we had the privilege to co-founding EELISA, our alliance that has become a landmark initiative in European higher education. I still remember our first discussion in Madrid. Unfortunately, we don't have image for our first discussion. We have image for, and thank you so much, Guillermo, to help us with some image. Can we sign the agreement? 2019, together with Professor Victor Gomez and Professor Guillermo Cisneros, first agreement on the first application. Thank you so much, Guillermo, for this photo. We have more and one short movie about our first agreement. We start together, and now EELISA embody a shared vision and how engineering education can respond to societal challenge by fostering innovation, responsibility, civic engagement, and strong connection between university and their communities. Your contribution to shaping this vision has been essential, Guillermo. And we are proud to have walked this path together. We are together in this very strong alliance, and thank you so much also your team, Alberto first, and after our new colleague for this, and also my colleague for this beautiful work in these years. I would also like to extend my warm welcome and sincere thanks to the delegation on Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. Thank you so much for this large delegation, and thank you so much for accept our invitation, and in particular for the Rector Oscar Garcia Suarez. Thank you so much, Oscar, for honoring us with their presence today. Your participation in this ceremony, it's a strong symbol for our partnership between our institution, not only in EELISA. This bilateral relationship between our universities, it's robust and dynamic one. I firmly believe that with the continued support and involvement of our communities, these relationships will grow even stronger. We are fully committed to further developing and capitalizing on our partnership, transforming into new opportunities that will benefit both institutions and contribute to the advance in European higher education area. The granting of this title of Doctor Honoris Causa to the Rector of Universidad Politehnica de Madrid for 2 terms, Professor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez, it's the same time a title awarded for the university itself. It's a way which we appreciate the value of this university, its history, and its role and place in European higher education area. We respect this and we appreciate this. Guillermo, be awarding you the title of Doctor Honoris Causa, we not only honor your contribution, but also reaffirm our shared history, our collaboration, and our confidence in the future we continue to build together with your team and your university. Por último, pero non menos importante, me gustaría expresar mi agradecimiento y mis felicitaciones a la familia de Guillermo, a su esposa y a sus hijos. Estén orgullosos de su esposo y de su padre. Es un hombre extraordinario. Le-am mulțumit și le-am spus că Guillermo este un om extraordinar, să fie mândri de el. We are deeply honored to welcome you, Guillermo, as a member of the Politehnica Bucharest academic community, and look forward to many more years of fruitful collaboration between our university. Congratulations and thank you.
I shall ask now Professor Oscar Garcia Suarez, Rector of the University, to say some words to us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Rector Magnificus of National University of Science and Technology, Politehnica Bucharest, dear Minea, dear President of the Senate, thank you for the ceremony you are offering us today. Distinguished members of the university community, authorities, ladies and gentlemen, it is very difficult for me to express the gratitude we feel today. Your institution has brought us together for a moment of deep significance. The investiture of Professor Guillermo Cisneros, Rector Emeritus of the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, as Doctor Honoris Causa. Rector Costoiu, your hospitality, both at UPB, of course, and Bucharest, has been exceptional. You have welcomed me and all my colleagues, and also the family of Guillermo, from UPN with a generosity, warmth, and a spirit of true academic friendship. We feel like home here. We are sincerely honored to be here. National University of Science and Technology, Politehnica Bucharest, stands today as a reference point for the European higher education. Your successful integration process of the renewal of your institutional mission, bringing together disciplines that once stood apart, demonstrate courage, vision, and a profound commitment to the future. This new strengthened UPB will, without any doubt, shape Romania's scientific and technological landscape and contribute meaningful to Europe. Within our beloved EELISA alliance, as you mentioned, your university has been and continues to be a cornerstone. UPB is a key partner of our alliance, whose impact grows year after year. Our academic research and collaboration from a long-standing relationship built on trust, respect, excellence, and a shared vision of what European engineering education can become. Allow me to give some words about today's honoree, Professor Guillermo Cisneros, my predecessor as rector of UPM. Through his 2 terms as rector and his early service as dean of the telecommunications school of UPM, Guillermo demonstrated conviction, determination, and a profound understanding of higher education. Maybe due to the international context that we are today, it is important to highlight the vision he had about the future of international accreditation when they were just starting out. His leadership was instrumental in achieving major regulatory advances that now allow us to offer integrated bachelor and master engineering programs and to develop European joint degrees, some of them in close cooperation with your institution. Inspired by his love of music and his engineering vision, he proposed the creation of new doctoral program at UPM, the Doctorate in Music and in Science and Technology. Under his leadership, UPM Student Symphonic Orchestra was also established. As rector of the coordinating university, he guided the alliance through its formative years with clarity and vision. In challenging moments of this alliance, he made decisive choices that make our unity stronger and set the foundation for the thrilling alliance we celebrate today. As EELISA marked his 5th anniversary last November, it became even clearer how much we owe to Professor Cisneros. His leadership, dedication, and his belief in shared education, European academic space deserve our deepest recognition and gratitude. Thank you, Guillermo. Let me conclude with a reflection on the moment we are living in Europe. We are navigating times that are very complex, uncertain, and demanding. Precisely for this reason, our institution must come together. UPB and UPM embodies the richness and diversity of Europe. We have a shared responsibility. Together, we can turn our aspirations into tangible achievements. I'm confident that, united, we will honor and carry forward the legacy of Professor Guillermo Cisneros, projecting it into a brighter future for our university, our societies, and our future. Congratulations, Guillermo. Thank you very much, Rector Guillermo. Thank you very much, Politécnica de Bucharest.
I shall ask now Professor Horia Iovu to say us some words without reading.
Estimado señor Rector Emérito Guillermo Cisneros Pérez, estimado señor Rector Óscar García Suárez, queridos colegas, queridos amigos, sean todos muy bienvenidos a la Universidad Politécnica de Bucarest. Hoy es un día verdaderamente especial para nosotros. Un día en el que nuestras universidades, la Universidad Politécnica de Madrid y la Universidad Politécnica de Bucarest, celebran no solo una colaboración académica ejemplar, sino también una relación construida con confianza, respeto y, sobre todo, con una profunda cercanía humana. La concesión del título de Doctor Honoris Causa al señor Rector Emérito Guillermo Cisneros Pérez es, ante todo, un gesto de gratitud y admiración. Gratitud por una trayectoria brillante dedicada a la educación superior y por su contribución decisiva al fortalecimiento de la Alianza EELISA. Admiración por la forma en que ha sabido unir personas, ideas e instituciones, creando lazos auténticos que han trascendido los marcos formales de la cooperación académica. Pero hoy celebramos algo aún más profundo. Celebramos a la persona. Celebramos a un hombre de una sensibilidad excepcional, de una elegancia discreta y de una humanidad sincera, que ha sabido construir una relación de amistad verdadera con nuestro rector Mihnea Costoiu. Gracias a esa amistad, nuestras universidades se sienten hoy más cercanas que nunca. Me atrevo a decir que se sienten como parte de una misma familia académica. Nos emociona contar hoy con la presencia de una delegación de primer nivel de la Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, encabezada por el señor rector Óscar García Suárez. Su presencia es una expresión clara del respeto, del afecto y de la profunda estima que rodean al profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez, y al mismo tiempo una señal de la voluntad compartida de seguir caminando juntos, de seguir construyendo futuro a través de proyectos comunes, programas conjuntos y colaboraciones duraderas. Para mí, participar en esta ceremonia es un verdadero honor. Me siento profundamente conectado con los valores de excelencia, compromiso y generosidad que definen la trayectoria del profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez. España es un país que llevo en el corazón, y cada encuentro académico y humano con sus representantes me hace sentir, una vez más, como en casa. A nuestros queridos invitados de España, les deseo de todo corazón que se sientan acogidos, cercanos, como entre amigos durante su estancia en Rumanía. Que estos días refuercen aún más nuestros lazos y nos inspiren a desarrollar juntos nuevos programas académicos y proyectos de investigación, siempre en beneficio de nuestros estudiantes y de nuestras comunidades universitarias. Para concluir, quiero expresar mis felicitaciones más sinceras y emocionadas al profesor Guillermo Cisneros Pérez y a su familia, que hoy lo acompaña con tanto cariño. Le deseamos una vida larga, serena y plena, llena de salud, alegrías y la satisfacción de haber dejado una huella profunda y duradera en tanta institución.
In order to emphasize the importance of our event, in this hall we have also to congratulate and to welcome the presence of the Rector of the Technical University of Republic of Moldavia, Professor Professor Viorel Bostan. And now we want to ask Professor Perez to say some words to our community. Please.
Thank you very much. Rector of National Science University Politécnica, Bucharest, President of its Senate and highest authority of Romanian government, Rector of Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, Rector of Universidad de Moldova, Vice Rectors of National University of Science and Technology, Politehnica Bucharest, Vice Rectors and members of current and former rectoral teams at Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, deans and authorities at this National University of Science and Technology, Politehnica Bucharest, Dean and Honorary Dean of Telecommunications Engineering School at Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, authorities and representatives of different bodies, faculty, personnel, students, dear all. First of all, I want to express my deep gratitude for the honor bestowed upon me here today by being awarded the title of Doctor Honoris Causa by this very prestigious National University of Science and Technology, Politehnica Bucharest. Thanks to its Senate, personally also to its rector, dear friend Professor Minea Costoiu, with whom I have shared many experiences and opinions over the past few years in the EELISA Alliance of Universities and in other international fora. Allow me here to add my gratitude for the personal satisfaction I have derived from working with everyone on the EELISA team at Bucharest. The fantastic experience is invaluable for having criteria and a critical spirit in order to make proposals on what I understand is necessary for the European Universities program of the European Commission. Based on these feelings, I will proceed to develop the prepared topic, Notes on Decision-Making Needs in the Deployment of the EC program on European University Alliances. I will start saying that the European Union was created in the 50s based on a specific industry, the European coal and steel community, and has progressively defined and established successive pillars for its construction, from the foundations of the common agricultural policy to the single currency, the euro, and a single European Central Bank, including the sharing of an area of free movement of people and goods, the Schengen area, the creation of the European Parliament, the European Commission, the European Court of Justice. In each of these pillars, there has been the transfer of sovereignty from each member state to the new European Community body. This has been so significant that not all countries in the Union fully participate in all these pillars, which have strengthened both the Union itself and the countries that have joined the Union. Thus, for example, border control for each member state of the Union has been entrusted to other member states within the Schengen area. Central banks of the member states have ceded powers to the new European Central Bank. National parliaments have done so in favor of the European Parliament. National governments in favor of the European Commission. National courts of justice in favor of European Court, and so on. In every case, there has always been a transfer of sovereignty, autonomy, or powers from the member states to these new European institutions. And these transfers have always been based on prior consideration that what was ceded should be more than compensated by the corresponding benefits obtained in return by the transferring states as a sine qua non for each member state's accession to each new European pillar. This is all without prejudice to the member states' prior compliance with certain conditions. In this scenario of the permanent creation and evolution of the European Union through new pillars, the European Commission launches and finances the European Universities Programme in the final stages of the 2010s. The European Commission's programme to create European universities has not received significant media attention. However, its importance should be emphasized. It is not a trivial matter, nor is the challenge insignificant, as it involves defining and building the European University pillar, following the chain of definitions and implementations of pillars that have been built in the European Union, such as those already mentioned. To launch this European Universities Programme, the European Commission issued a call for proposals open to consortia of existing universities across Europe. These consortia, essentially alliances, would become the foundation of the European universities targeted by the programme. The selection process carried out by the European Commission in this call was highly rigorous, ultimately resulting in the acceptance of no more than 65 multinational consortia or alliances whose members are a restricted group, despite their recognition, from among the total number of universities and higher education institutions existing in Europe. Politehnica, Bucharest, and UPM are on this board. The programme was established without a prior legislative basis, neither at the European level nor at the level of the member states of the Union, at least in general terms. Thus, each consortium or alliance serves as a demonstrator as required by the European Commission, so that one day at some point the conditions will arise for the European Commission to draft the directive on European universities that the member states can then transpose into their respective national laws. Clearly, this requires prior debate and consensus among the member states and the European Union, which in this case must respect the principle of university autonomy. It should be noted on this point that such debate and consequently such consensus has not yet taken place. In this context, these demonstrators will have to propose and test a series of possible solutions to be made up of the European universities outcoming from the programme in various aspects, such as, first, its legal nature and governance, as some of its consequences, its sustainable financing and its eligibility to receive funds according to European Commission regulations must be addressed. Second, degree offering, bachelor, master, PhD, together with its cross-border qualification and accreditation. Correspondingly, The issuance and safekeeping or custody of those degrees must be addressed, as well as international student mobility for purposes with other European programs. Its role in research transfer to industry and society must also be addressed. Its consequences are ability to receive funding and regulations, and industrial relations, in promoting employability and entrepreneurship, science, humanities, arts and culture. And fourth, their role as providers of university services, together with or besides of the currently existing universities in Europe, must also be addressed. Let's make some notes on these aspects below. First, on the legal nature and eligibility for sustainable financing. Regarding their legal nature, the European Commission has expressed that it would like these consortia or alliances to acquire their own legal status in some way. A primary question that arises among the universities within consortia or alliances concerns their motivations, since, for instance, joint, double, or multiple degree programs can be offered without formal constitution. A simple agreement between the parties suffices. Similarly, research funding or funding from other European Commission programs can be received directly by the universities. A contract with the funding institution is again sufficient. While noting this year, these topics will be revisited when discussing degree offerings and the role of research and innovation. On the other hand, consortia or alliances that take this step are completely free to establish their entity and its headquarters in any member state of the European Union. However, as far as is known, not all cases have involved a prior analysis of the potential advantages or disadvantages of their respective legal systems, which differ significantly in certain aspects, in order to make the decision on the location of such constitution and the headquarters establishment. Whether by inertia or for other reasons, a significant number of consortia or alliances have taken this step, have established their entity in Belgium, therefore under Belgian law, which is not the European Union law, and in the form of an association such as an AISBL, International Non-Profit Association. The implications of this decision are significant. In addition to aforementioned advantages and disadvantages of different national legal systems, establishing an association has repercussions regarding, for example, the entity's potential ineligibility to receive national or international public funds, including those from the European Commission's Erasmus Plus program. This presents a paradox. While university consortia or alliances are receiving these funds, the entity created might not be eligible to receive them, despite created with those same funds from those same consortia or alliances. This is because there are no legal mechanisms designed for the creation of public law entities, much less transnational ones, originating from this European universities program, either under European Union law or under the laws of any of the member states, which moreover have different legal frameworks for entities within their respective public sectors. Additionally, first, the member states of the European Union are currently engaged in internal debates regarding the funding model for their existing public universities. Consequently, they have not considered funding sustainably any new public entities emerging from the European program as new public universities, nor sustainably whatever consortia or alliances at large. Furthermore, some member states are already questioning the occasional aid they have provided to the programs, consortia, or alliances, in some cases arguing that some of their members do not meet the definition of public universities under their respective legal systems. Second, the European Commission is neither considering a sustainable mechanism for funding these new European universities beyond this program, whether they are consortia or alliances, or those that have opted to become entities with their own legal status. In the same way that public bodies of the Union corresponding to other pillars, the European Parliament, the European Court of Justice, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and so on and so forth, are being funded. So far, their funding has just been extended. There have been already 2 phases through the Erasmus Plus program, which is not intended to provide permanent funding to statutorily established bodies simply by virtue of their status. And third, if such an entity existed, where would students enroll, this is to say, pay their fees? The students would have to choose to pay their fees in that entity and under the law of the country where it is established, because they could receive some degrees from the entity and consequently from that country, instead of, or we should say in addition to, or perhaps at the expense of, enrolling in the original university which is the entity's member. Having conducted this analysis, the following questions remain. How could the emerging European universities of the program be sustainably financed? Who would be the public actors responsible for this funding and under what model? Is the creation of entities with their own legal status truly the objective, or is it more effective to maintain consortiums or alliances with some new type of binding legal document that might need to be designed in accordance with the European law? How do these aspects fit into the legal systems of the member states of the Union, particularly concerning their respective public sectors? How will all of this be reconciled with the sovereignty and autonomy of existing universities? What distribution of roles will exist between the new European universities of the program and the universities members of the consortia or alliances that created them, so that they are not and are not perceived as direct competitors? Currently, these questions remain unanswered, and they will remain so until the aforementioned issues are resolved. With the second phase of the European Universities program funded by Erasmus Plus already well underway, the direct involvement of the European Union member states together with the European Commission is now necessary to make decisions that will serve as a guide for consortia or alliances, both in this second phase and in hypothetical third phase and beyond. These decisions must respect university autonomy while also making it clear that the outcome must provide clear benefits that outweigh any concessions that may be necessary. The same balance must apply to the regulatory and executive powers in university matters of each and every EU member state, regulations which, to begin with, are not uniform across Europe. In other words, the steps should be taken in the same way as they have been done in the pillars of European construction that have been developing since the 50s. Now let's devote a few words on the degree offering, bachelor, master, PhD, cross-border qualification and accreditation, issuance and safekeeping of those degrees, as well as international student mobility. Regarding the degree offering, bachelor, master, PhD, the European Commission has expressed that it would like these consortia or alliances to offer joint degrees with the express indication that they therefore do not refer to double or multiple degrees. Again, the first question that arises among the universities that are members of the consortia or alliances is about the possible motivations for moving towards joint degrees instead of double or multiple degrees. In both cases, either joint or double multiple degrees, it's sufficient to establish an agreement between the parties, the participating universities. In the first case, the signing of the said single joint agreement, or joint degree, is carried out in some way stipulated and set in the said agreement by the competent authorities of each and every participating university. In the second case, each competent authority of each university separately signs their corresponding degree from the several that the student receives. But in case of entity constitution, there should be as well the need to know who is that said competent authority and to sign what issue in case of fees are paid to it by the student, which applies indeed only in the first case. Regarding the safekeeping or custody of degrees, something similar occurs. In case of entity constitution, there should as well be the need to know who and where is located the said safekeeping responsibility. And there are more questions on the table. The universities that are members of the consortium alliances have passed a very demanding selection process set by the European Commission. This means that they are universities that typically have well-established brands recognized for their names and degrees, among other topics. Consequently, offering joint degrees means creating something new aside of those brands, while also creating difficulties in explaining to new students the role a new joint degree plays in relation to their established and prestigious degrees, precisely the degrees that attracted those new students to consider studying at the same university. And this explanation cannot create a perception of self-competition between the new joint degree and the well-established prestigious degrees. Another difficulty that arises for joint degrees is that they must be recognized transnational in Europe while simultaneously complying with the legal systems of several European Union member states, whose legislation on this matter is also heterogeneous despite sharing a common European higher education area. Generally speaking, there are no mechanisms for either ex-ante or ex-post transnational recognition or cross-border accreditation of degrees, not even by recognition of accreditation made by agencies listed as members of the European Quality Assurance Register for Higher Education, the EQAR, and or by professional accrediting agencies such as, for instance, INAE, that for this usually into agreements with EQAR. Of the European member states in a general way, with very few exceptions, expressly dedicated to joint degree initiatives that emerge precisely from the consortia or alliances of the European Universities Programme. And if we're talking about degrees that qualify for a profession with reserve activity, so-called regulated profession in some countries, the matter becomes even more complicated. These degrees typically refer to professions in areas such as healthcare, engineering, law, and education, among others. While the university degree serves as the passport to these professions, it is the responsibility of the member states to determine how to access them, either through state examinations or by stipulation examination formats at the universities, etc., and consequently to determine the minimum subjects that the curricula of the corresponding university degrees must contain. These minimum subjects are legislated by the European member states and differ in each European member state. This heterogeneity creates additional difficulties in establishing any joint degree that aims to provide access to these professions, since a single curriculum across different universities would have to include all the minimum subjects required by each and every member state to be valid in all countries. In the light of this, double or multiple degrees already solve these issues of access to these regulated professions, because each degree within the double or multiple degree fully satisfies the legislation about these professions of the country where every corresponding university is located. Obviously, the prerogatives associated with the research activity of the different professional regulation may differ from country to country because each state's legislation varies in this regard. However, this aspect will be exactly identical in the case of joint degrees for the same reason. In this scenario, could the European Commission's stated desire to move towards joint degrees actually hinder the programme's objectives? Would there be any alternative paths to move forward? In some university consortia or alliances with the European programme, some joint degrees are being offered ex novo, which are not usually related to qualification for regulated professions, and whose purpose is in most cases to provide added value for students by drafting potential approaches to cross-border recognition while awaiting some kind of legal regulation to that effect. In some instances, these joint degrees are offered as an add-on to students who have completed or are currently completing other degrees from member universities within the alliances. And these other degrees may even be qualifying for regulated professions and may have been pursued by the students out double or multiple degrees among the same or even other universities. In this way, the new joint degrees avoid creating self-competition inside each university and also solve the issue of professional accreditation, at least in the countries where the offering universities are located. Thus, symbiosis is created between joint degrees and double or multiple degrees, which can even be combined both intra and inter-alliances in order to further enhance the program. In fact, there are already degrees, usually double or multiple, among universities that are members of different consortia or alliances, which is a possible basis for the inter-alliance operation with the dynamic expressed. In all the study plans offered through these consortia or alliances, the issue of international student mobility is always present. On this topic, this lecture will simply point out that such mobility, at least in relation to European funding, must be based on clear and differential objectives. In other words, the European University program cannot become a parallel instrument to the traditional Erasmus program for European student mobility. Opportunities and reasons exist. They simply need to be put into practice. One example could be mobility programs for final year students and even recent graduates with the aim of rotating through the entrepreneurship programs offered by the universities within the consortium. These aspects. And similarly to what was mentioned concerning sustainable financing, at this point, with the second phase of the European Universities program already well underway, the direct involvement of the European Union member states together with the European Commission is now necessary to make decisions that will serve as a guide for consortia or alliances. And taking a look to financing topics, these decisions should probably focus on how to prevent consortia or alliances, whether formally established or not as legal entities, from self-competing with their own member universities, since the same things cannot be funded twice by national or European public administrations, while also ensuring that the solutions adopted could be a potential instrument for solving other problems. The need at this point to promote the cross-border recognition and accreditation of university degrees is fundamental and constitutes an obstacle if the European Union member states do not decisively include in their respective legislation this kind of recognition in conjunction with needed European Commission directives. It must be emphasized for the offering of degrees, whether joint, double, or multiple, it is neither a requirement nor a necessity to have established an illegally separated entity from the consortium alliance or universities. Agreements between the parties, the universities, are sufficient. At this point, a directive from the European Commission regarding the minimum validity periods required for such agreements, with clear provisions also addressing the cases of their possible termination, would be beneficial, since the different member states stipulate just maximum validity periods for their public sector agreements in their respective legal systems that would be poorly or not at all compatible with the minimum periods necessary to establish and offer university degrees. Finally, in the light of the above, perhaps the solution for the degrees offering from consortia or alliances is not just joint degrees, but an intelligently symbiotic combination of joint and double or multiple degrees. On research innovation and knowledge transfer, regarding its role in research and innovation, as well as knowledge transfer to industry and society in general, let's speak about research and innovation, it's worth highlighting some specific aspects among the many possible ones. The work of raising R&I funds, whether through competitive public calls for proposals or through the prestige that attracts direct private funding for projects, is something universities have been doing freely. They can either act independently or join or lead consortia among them and or together with industries and others. This will depend on the requirements of the call for proposals on the funding entities or institutions. At this point, the emergence of consortia or alliances with the European Universities Programme prompts some reflections on this matter. A relevant question is whether these consortia or alliances can impose specific methods on their member universities for accessing research and innovation funding. Currently, there are no regulations on this matter, neither from the European Commission nor from the European Union member states. In this regard, it's crucial to bear in mind that the actions of someone representing the members of the university consortium or alliance would have full legal force before the relevant authority, for example, national authorities or the European Commission itself, if they act on behalf of the others as presidency of an association, such as an AISBL. However, this does not apply if they act as a representative of a consortium or alliance, which is therefore merely a grouping without legal standing. The same legal force could exist for applying restrictions to the free action of the association's members unless expressly stated otherwise in its constitutional statutes, avoiding this way to run counter to the interests of its members. Consequently, any transfers of representation and other powers made by members university of consortia or alliances upon the entities for to the entity itself, as well as to representatives to its body, carefully assessed. There is encourage the formation of such entities. For example, associations from any groupings, consortia or alliances for any purpose, including research and innovation. This encouragement is done either by the partners or even by the funding bodies or institutions, for example, the European Commission itself. The immediate consequence is that it is relatively easy to portray these consortia or alliances as research and innovation lobbies for R&I issues, just like so many others in Europe. Furthermore, establishing an entity with its own legal status can strengthen its lobbying position without diminishing its ability to attract R&I funds, since there are no restrictions based on its potential private legal nature. For instance, AISBLs. In this way, the said funding bodies and institutions can even delegate to them as intermediaries the management of the distribution of funds, for example, in the form of cascading calls. In this process, the intermediary entity could retain a portion of these funds for its members' activities as if it were an in-house resource of the funding body or entity, and hence its great importance and the interest of its members, and distribute the remainder of the funds to other beneficiaries. In any case, the funding body or entity must ensure the proper use of funds over which it delegates the management, and to this end, for example, the European Commission changes the legal requirement of joint technical responsibility for the joint responsibility. And this full joint liability affects all members of the intermediary entity, AISBL or the association in general, before the funding entity, for example, the European Commission, regardless of whether or not they participating in raising or executing those funds, unless such joint and several liability is expressly limited in the entity's constitutional statutes, as well as if and only if some higher order rule does not prevent such limitation of liability. Of course, the said constitutional statutes must also establish who is to pay the share of the partners benefiting from the limitation, since full joint liability to the funding authority must necessarily be maintained. Having said all this, it does not appear that the objective of the European Universities program is to create entities that just serve as intermediaries or even lobbies to attract and manage research and innovation funding. At least, and in case, not at its sole objective. However, the temptation arises among consortia and alliances becoming entities to operate with this aim. Consequently, and in this current context, with the second phase of the European Universities program already well underway, it's absolutely necessary for the European Commission, with the involvement of European Union member states, to make a series of decisions in order to prevent undesirable outcomes for the program. Only with these decisions, which may be transformed into EC directives, can the role that consortia or alliance should play in attracting research and innovation funding be defined, along with the impact this has on their relationship with industry and on promoting employability and entrepreneurship, science, humanities, arts, and culture, all at the forefront of knowledge, to dump permanently everything onto their high-level excellence degrees. Furthermore, it is essential also for R&I To prevent such consortia or alliances, whether or not they become formal entities, from self-competing with the universities that comprise them, because as has already been mentioned for other aspects, it cannot be that the same aspects are financed with public funds from different European and member state administration to the consortia or alliances, and at the same time also to the universities that make them up. And as the fourth and last step, on the role of agents providing universities, regarding their role as providers of university service within the context of existing universities in Europe, it is worth noting that the European Universities Programme was launched by the European Commission at a time where some member states of the Union were undergoing a possible rethinking of their own university model. At large, universities are seen by EU member states as provider of a public service that is neither clearly nor completely defined in their respective legislations. Or perhaps it is a service of general interest that has not been legally declared as such, and therefore the necessary universal service within the broader service of general interest has not been defined in the way that would be the case in a general instance of service liberalization. Typically, the legislation of these member states refers generically to a university service consisting of teaching, research, and knowledge transfer. However, nothing has been specified regarding these three aspects that could, in this case, lead, for example, to a hypothetical competitive bidding process for the entry of private agents as service providers, whose entry has been occurring in practice with no bidding process, and ensure that such a bidding process is compatible with the legal framework for defining and providing a service of general interest, with a regulator establishing deployment territories along with the maximum number of service providers that every territory can accommodate, service content for each agent in every territory, and minimum high-level quality standards for the various service deployment components. All these lacks of specificity have consequences. Some of them are discussed here as a first consequence. Member states also lack clear rules for regulating and objectively measuring the quality of university services, which are de facto provided by both public and private entities. Furthermore, the concept of public versus private entity may be understood differently in each EU member state due to different definitions in their respective legal systems regarding the public sector to which their public universities belong. As a second consequence, the paradox of an incomprehensible competition arises within each country between public entities funded with public money and private entities funded with private money and paying taxes to the public treasury. To provide a service that is not clearly defined, is therefore not at all regulated, and whose quality consequently cannot be objectively determined and measured in absolute and regulatory terms, much less extrapolated to supranational scenarios such as the European Universities Programme. This paradox is incomprehensible competition occurs because all these ambiguities lead to total uncertainty regarding the specific service concept that the public sector needs to cover through its service providers, namely universities, and how these providers should structure their service delivery in terms of territory, contents, or both. And as a third consequence, there is even more incomprehensible situation that public agents, public universities financed by the same public administration in a given territory compete fiercely among themselves in the provision of this service that is not clearly defined, for which they respectively showcase their corresponding strengths in operations that are clearly marketing operations, since there is no regulation and regulative measure of the quality of the service. And based on these premises in the current scenario, there is currently an attempt to extrapolate something, the set demonstrators from public universities that are members of consortia alliances, with the best of intentions to the European Universities Programme. Furthermore, there is a frantic raised to establish AISBLs without any certainty about the motivations, as already mentioned, from these university consortium or alliances. These AISBLs are governed by private law, as neither European law nor the law European state members provide regulations of procedures for creating public sector entities or institutions coming from the European Universities Programme. As already mentioned, this is compounded by the lack of analysis regarding the potential advantages or disadvantages about their creation and about choosing on their subsequent location. Therefore, regarding the issue of university services and their provision, and at this stage of progress in the second phase of the European Universities Programme, a series of decisions from the European Commission are now necessary with the active involvement of the European Union member states. These decisions must, on one hand, link the service to their respective public sectors, and on the other hand, consider whether it constitutes a service of general interest, and consequently define the corresponding legal framework, including the absolutely necessary role of the public sector in such definitions and regulations. If these definitions are not established, and if the necessary restructuring of each EU member state's public sector is not carried out, further difficulties will arise. In particular, it will be very difficult to convince public administrations, both European and national, as well as any national private sources of funding to sustainable finance or contribute to financing the outcome of the European Universities Programme in the long term. For example, the 65 consortia or alliances that would have become universities. This is especially true given that the various public administrations of the European Union member states are currently undergoing processes of potential reorganization of their respective public sectors, which will inevitably affect their financial contributions. Anyway, this lecture does not intend to resolve or even propose about the definition of the university service for the 21st century in Europe across rest. That will be another chapter. It seeks to highlight an urgency to the diverse situation member states as well as at the European level. To recap and conclude, some final thoughts are presented below. This lecture analyzes the current situation of the European Universities Programme funded by the European Commission through Erasmus Plus funds. At this stage of the second phase of the programme, concrete decisions from the European Commission are urgently needed. Decisions that will guide the programme's consortia alliances with the active involvement of the European member states. Several areas where such decisions and active involvement should be urgently addressed have been outlined. Failure to do so will result, at least, in the following consequences. It will be very difficult or impossible to take the next steps in the program. Each consortium or alliance will do what it deems appropriate, and there will be even inconsistencies between the different groups. Furthermore, it will be difficult and even more impossible, unless someone truly sets about it right now, to clearly establish the advantages of creating this new pillar of European building, that of universities, compared to the corresponding transfer of sovereignty and autonomy that would have to be made in relation to the legal capacities of the European Union member states, in the same way that has been the case for the construction of other pillars since the 50s. In this pillar, the corresponding university autonomy that each country grants according to its respective legislation must also be respected, and therefore the consequences of these advantages and disadvantages on the autonomy and sovereignty of the universities must be considered. On the other hand, if these decisions are not made immediately, other aspects would complicate the situation. As already mentioned, after a very demanding selection process by the European Commission, only a restricted group, despite their recognition, from among the total number of universities and higher education institutions in Europe, existing in Europe, are members of any consortium or alliance within the program. This clearly means that other actors outside the program are outside the program while skeptically monitoring the process, except for possible indirect involvement through mechanisms established either by some alliances or by some European Union member states of the Union. while those that are included undoubtedly argue that they apply to a completely open and competitive call for proposals for a European construction task. This situation creates significant tensions, which therefore require clarifying these prospects with decisions as soon as possible. Because although the European Commission has followed the same open call procedure as in other programs, then resulting in varying levels of involvement for different universities, the distinguishing feature of this European Universities program is that its outcome could likely affect all existing universities and higher education institutions throughout the whole European higher education area. And once the decisions have been made between the European Commission and the European Member States, in this case, with the participation of universities throughout their consortia or alliances of the EC program, given their legal and statutory autonomy, it is virtually certain that innovative action in European Union law will be necessary, as has been the case in the development of each European pillar, to create the corresponding directive that the EU member states can then transpose and adopt. The success of the program, as we hope and expect, depends on all of this. Of course, these ideas are subject to any debate that may arise if better founded opinions than mine occurs. In closing, I want to emphasize my deep gratitude expressed at the beginning for the honor bestowed upon me here today by being awarded the title of Doctor Honoris Causa by this very prestigious National University of Science and Technology, Politehnica, Bucharest, to its Senate, to its people on the EELISA team, and especially to its rector, my friend, Professor Mihnea Kostoiu. I also want to thank the current and former authorities of UPM, with its rector, Professor Oscar Garcia Suarez, at the head, for being here today. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Now, after this general presentation, I shall ask Professor Pérez to sign here in our honor book. And after that, all of you are invited to come here and to sign as a witness of this event. Thank you very much. Please. You have to write some words.
Before finish, I want to thank again our colleague from Madrid, big delegation, and also thank you so much our colleague from Chisinau. Thank you so much, Viorel and Dinu. It's a very important moment also for our university, and I'm sure also from Politehnica de Madrid. And we are very happy because we are together here. Please. After Guillermo, you sign also. We sign it. honorary book for history. And after the night finish, and we have a photo in front of the whole couple, and have a photo session with many combinations. And after this short cocktail.
Thank you.
Yeah, just this time.
Oscar, you can have a write a message.
It's not a room. Rector.
Please, Matt.
After you will sign, we have to go outside to have a glass of champagne. But after.
In few moments, some moment for 2019, more picture, not only 2 or 3. Doamnelor și domnilor, o să vă invităm în față să facem o fotografie de grup după ce semnăm în Cartea de Onoare. Jos în holul central.